Alrighty, can you hear me? Welcome to the live stream where we launch Caddy 2.6. So welcome to all of you, all three of you who are currently watching. I'll keep my eye on the chat throughout this stream, and there'll probably be a minute or so delay with the chats, but I'll try and get to your questions, or I'll take requests. But yeah, let's go ahead and launch. Let's go ahead and tag the release, and then while that's building, let's kind of go over some of the features and changes in this version. So I think this is the biggest release that we've had since Caddy 2, and you'll see why as we kind of go through all the changes, and hopefully you'll get excited about it as I am. So welcome Sergey, Eric, and Mohammed who are on the chat. Mohammed's one of our maintainers, especially for our CI and other distributable side of things, but he's also really helpful in fixing a lot of the bugs or working through some of the more gnarly, complicated issues that Francis and I don't want to touch. So thank you for that. So yeah, let's start by where's my thing? I have the release notes down there, which I'm going to show you. I have 30 kilobytes of release notes. Here we go. So I think we're ready to tag it. So to do that, it's kind of silly. I have this little script that I uncomment a little safety so I don't accidentally run this. And then I just run git ignore. Let's see here. There we go. Git ignore tag.sh. Type the tag, make sure it's right, and then I think we're good to go. So this is going to take probably 30 minutes or so to release, but while that's happening, I'll kind of go through some of the changes and improvements and awesome things to be excited about. So I always get sweaty hands at this point where it's the same sensation I get when I'm rock climbing and I'm on the wall or on the cliff, and I don't know how my next step is gonna go, but hopefully this will work. So we had 5 betas. 3 or 4 of them were really just for testing the CI upgrades, which I'll explain later. But our beta process caught a few bugs and we fixed those. And so I think 2.6 is gonna be pretty good. But you'll probably, if you run into any little quirks or regressions, definitely let us know. But we had quite a few people test this, including some larger companies. So hoping for a good release. All the tests are passing. So yeah, here we go. All right. So if we go back to GitHub. I don't know how to use my OS's Alt tab. There we go. We should see the release running, and this will probably take a while. So in the meantime, let me kind of give you the summary of release notes. Wow, it's just really going to town, huh? I hope this works. It worked last time, a couple days ago, so haven't changed the CI since then. Hopefully it'll work today. That would be a bummer if our release did not work. Okay, so let me see here. I want to, Francis has arrived in the chat. I want to go over the highlights of this version without spoiling the release notes on my screen all at once. How do I do this? Uh-oh. There they go. You can't see those, right? Not ready to spoil all of them yet. Okay, well, I think the first thing I do want to mention is that this doesn't have a picture. I want a picture. Wikipedia. So we've decided to dedicate this release to Peter Eckersley, who was a huge part of founding Let's Encrypt, and he worked at the EFF working on Privacy Badger and CertBot, and really just bringing privacy and HTTPS everywhere. And he passed away earlier this month, and so I had the opportunity to meet Peter, and that's an occasion that I will never forget. And I met him at the Let's Encrypt launch party back in 2015, and that was really cool. I was surrounded by really smart people, and I definitely felt very small next to all these brilliant minds. Anyway, we dedicate this release to Peter and his work, and we hope that it will live on through the work we're doing and through the rest of the internet. He co-authored a paper about Let's Encrypt a couple years later, where they wrote that Caddy was kind of the gold standard for Acme integrations, and they wanted to see other servers follow Caddy's lead. So so this goes out to Peter. And then I also want to talk about our sponsors. So Caddy is brought to you by ZeroSSL. This is a ZeroSSL project. Ooh, there's my chair. And so we're thankful for that support to be able to continue working on Caddy, and especially all of our larger and smaller sponsors. We have over 60 now through GitHub, which we're very grateful for. And just show you that here. So this is the sponsor page. It's under my name, but it supports the project, the Caddy project. And we have a good variety of sponsors. And if you're thinking about sponsoring, you'd be in very good company. We were very happy to recently welcome Stripe as a sponsor, an enterprise sponsor. They use Caddy internally pretty heavily for their internal systems. And quite a few of the features that we'll talk about, that actually from their last release, 2.5.2, but also this release, were influenced and made possible because of Stripe support. We also want to acknowledge other notable sponsors and those who aren't as maybe well known but should be. I encourage you to kind of look through this list here and just see the variety of people and companies that are making Caddy possible. So yeah, there's Stripe, Ken White, we've got Tailscale, and various members of the programming community and the privacy community. So thank you for your support. Due to my own recent life upgrades, we are now actually sustaining a family off of these sponsorships, because this is my job, is working on Caddy. So yeah, I really appreciate that. And if your company uses Caddy or benefits from it, or if your customers use it or benefit from Caddy, then I would encourage your company to become a sponsor, because sponsors, they tend to come and go, and as normal, and but we always need new sponsors to keep the project going. And I think this is it's a more crucial project now than ever, and so we're really taking this seriously. So we really appreciate all those who do sponsor the project. And all these tiers over here on the right, these are all kind of guidelines or like ideas. This is kind of my base offering, but we can customize these for your company depending on what your needs are and requirements. So don't hesitate to ask if you want something custom. We can definitely work on that. Let's see how the release is doing. It's building binary. So this is what takes a while, is a lot of compiling. I mean, compiling goes fast, but CI runs on very, very, very shared processor time. So we're not expecting anything too quick here. Okay, so let's talk about some of the features that are coming in this version that you're going to get. Let's see here. I think what I'll do is look at some of the, so GitHub and our CI both automatically create some release notes. So maybe, I'll just do a comparison here. Tags v252 and compare that to 260. So we have almost 130 commits for this release. And this is really significant. So I think our biggest feature here that you're going to see is that Caddy 2.6 is the very first server to enable HTTP 3 by default for all configurations. So we've graduated HTTP 3 from experimental status to first class feature, just as much as HTTP 2 and HTTP 1. So let's see here. Do I have... This is not in order. Enable HTTP 3 by default. So in this commit, we have removed the allow H2C and experimental HTTP 3 parameters, which were always experimental. In our documentation, we talked about how this would probably change because H2C was kind of like let's try this out. Experimental HTTP 3 was obviously because it was a new protocol. We've replaced those. So in your Caddy file, instead of specifying those, you'll have a protocols kind of a sub option within your server options. And you can actually just easily specify H1, H2, H2C, or H3 to toggle 8 different HTTP versions. And we've deprecated the old protocol option, which customized things kind of are like mix and match. Like there was like allow H2C and like anyway, it didn't make a lot of sense. So in Caddy 2.6 we have protocols where you can just specify H1, H2, H3. Where's the, here, I'm gonna go to the pull request. This might, this wasn't, oh yeah. So I'll just show you the code here. So yeah, so let me show you where we do this. So you can see in the JSON, by default, so we don't, this is a test, but by default H1, H2, and H3 are the values of protocols. So those protocols are enabled by default. HTTP 2 over clear text is not enabled by default because, well, it's clear text, so don't use it unless you really need to or have like a good reason that you don't need security. Huge thank you to Martin Seaman for maintaining the QuickGo library, which actually provides HTTP 3 functionality. So we've been working with him to make that possible, so thank you for that, Martin. Let's see here. Oh yeah, so our HTTP 3 implementation is sort of, it's designed to mitigate like amplification attacks by requiring the client to validate their address when the server is under load. So this adds around trip time, but we only do it when the server is under load. Some Hacker News comments recently pointed out that this is not the best way to do it. And that's probably true. This is a pretty naive approach where we're basically saying if we have more than 1,000 requests currently, then we're under load. Which we probably need to get in under at the packet layer a little more and get some more information that way. So we've opened an issue upstream in the QuickGo library to ask Martin what his thoughts are and if we can get some information exposed from the underlying library to determine whether we need address validation, or maybe to see if that is kind of even being done for us at that level anyway. So we do have some basic mitigation features in place, but we're going to improve that here as time goes on. So you can now choose which HTTP versions you want to run. So HTTP 1, HTTP 2, HTTP 3. You can run like HTTP 1 and HTTP 2, or you can run just HTTP 3 alone if you're really hardcore and really don't care about compatibility. But because of the way the Go standard library and like various like HTTP implementations in Go work, we can't serve HTTP 2, for example, without enabling HTTP 1, because the Go standard library does like an upgrade from 1 to 2, and so they're kind of they're intertwined together, and so we would have to implement our own HTTP server to support just HTTP 2. Which we can do, and I did in my initial pull request, and I documented, well, I couldn't get it to work. Someone commented saying that, oh, you need to do this with your curl command. I was like, oh. By that time, though, I had kind of taken down my test scaffolding and stuff, and I was like, well, maybe in the future, if someone really needs that, like if you have a really good use case to only serve HTTP 2 and not HTTP 1, then maybe we can talk about it, but I would much rather stick to using the Go standard library than our own server implementation. So yeah, by default we enable all the protocols except H2C. So here we disable HTTP 2 if you don't have it enabled. We enable H2C if it is configured. We enable HTTP 1 if configured, which also serves HTTP 2, I think, if configured. And remember that H1 has to be specified if H2 is specified currently. So yeah. Oh yeah, so we'll have our documentation updated here shortly on our website, so you can see how to configure the different protocols. It's pretty easy. Here we serve HTTP 3. So yeah, there you go, HTTP 3 by default. So I see a question in the chat about how to use Caddy's dynamic DNS. I'm assuming you're talking about this plugin here. So this plugin allows you to have Caddy automatically set your A and quadruple A records to your server's IP address so that you don't have to manage your DNS settings yourself. And that's really useful if you have like a dynamic IP address, like on a home server or something. So this is the plugin. It's in my account /Caddy dynamic DNS, and you just put this at the top of your Caddy file with your DNS provider and then like whatever credentials it takes, and you specify your domains. Specifying the domains is a little funky because you have to specify the zone and then the subdomain, and this eliminates any guesswork that the program would otherwise have to do. So you just say domains, and then you say whatever the zone is, and then your subdomains. So the @ sign is of course the kind of the canonical, like the zone itself, or you can do subdomains like www or subdomain. You can also customize the different ways of getting the IP address. So you can use UPnP to ask the router, what's my public IP address? Or you can simply make an HTTP request to one of these sites and it returns your IP address, which is really nice. So you can do it in JSON too. So like any Caddy plugin, to do this, you just, now this does require a DNS provider module, but you can just go to the Caddy website and find dynamic DNS and click it, and then choose your cloud, like if you have Cloudflare for your DNS or whatever your name server host is, then you choose that plugin, and then once you have those features selected, you just download it, and that's it. And you just use it. So in your config. Okay, release is still building. That's good. Okay, another really cool feature coming here is virtual file systems. So what we've done is we have eliminated in the file server, the static file server, we've eliminated all the hard-coded os.open, os.stat calls, which only uses the local disk, and we've now are using Go's FS package, which is a read-only virtual file system API, basically. So I guess there's not much to show on this particular PR. I think so. Our release notes that I've drafted up, like 30 kilobytes of it, has examples and explanations and all this useful stuff. So definitely look at the release notes. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this you can just see that we've changed to using the FS package. So instead of saying like dir.readdir on a hard-coded os.file, it's dir.readdir on a fs.readdir file. We also specify a max size of that read, by the way, which seems like a good idea. Maybe it should be configurable. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, instead of os.stat, it's the file system.stat. So pretty easy to change over, actually. There were a couple little nuances. The operating systems are much more lenient about messy file paths, like with regards to separators and like a trailing slash, for example, or things like that. But the FS APIs are much more strict, so we do some more like cleanup, basically. So here we load the file system module. And so this is actually really cool because what it allows you to do is serve static files from anything that can act like a file system. Oh, and I've vastly worked on, like, improved the documentation for the file server. So we had one line before that just said it was a file server. And actually it was still using terms from like the pre-beta Caddy too, like long time ago. Like responder, we had different kinds of handler modules where like some handlers were middleware and some were responders. Middleware just kept always called the next handler, and responders always terminated the handler chain. We found out that very quickly that was not going to work because sometimes you don't know if the handler is going to write the response or not. So got rid of this really, really old code, this comment, replaced it with a much more descriptive comment that you will see on our online docs. These are for the JSON docs. So you can see how we have our file system module here that you can specify. It can be an fs dot. It doesn't. We actually changed it later. Thanks, Dave, for this improvement. It can just be an fs.fs. Doesn't have to be a statfs. And yeah, again, instead of os.stat, it's file system.stat. File is not an OS file, it's an FS file. And oh yeah, so the default file system is a little fs that we've written called osfs, which is just os.open and os.stat. So, but this is cool because now you can serve files from databases or archive files or anything that's like can act like a file system, maybe even S3 or like an online, some sort of cloud storage if you're into that. I'll show you a cool Caddy embed. I wrote a little plugin here that uses this to actually embed your file server or your website directly into your server binary. So this is a Caddy plugin that's a little funky because it compiles your website into the binary, so you can't download this from our download page because our download page doesn't have your website files, obviously. So you have to build this yourself, but we have instructions. You just clone the repo, and you put your website in the files subfolder here. You don't have to. You could put it somewhere else or rename this, but you have to know how to change the code to do that. So if you just put your website in the files folder, and then you just run xcaddy build with this plugin. Make sure you do a local replacement because, again, this repo doesn't have your site's files, so you need to use your local copy. That's this equals dot. That's a Go modules thing. You're basically saying, hey, where I'm using the Caddy embed package, actually use the package in the current folder, which should include your site at that point. And then to serve your embedded site, you just do fs embedded, and voila. So that's kind of cool. Your site, wherever your server goes, your site goes. And we're serving everything out of memory here instead of the disk. So that's a cool feature that has been recently enabled, is virtual file systems. So there's native support for that now. So we encourage you to write file system implementations that go well with this so that you can serve static files from more things. Let's see, our release is currently working on the free BSD binaries. Okay, what else? Oh, the Caddy respond command. So this is cool. Yeah, Francis wants an xcaddy flag to make embedding your site easier. I think that'd be cool. If you are interested in embedding your site into your server more easily, then join our discussion on GitHub for that. So the Caddy respond command is a new subcommand that makes it easy to spin up really simple HTTP servers for testing and development. It's basically the static response handler, but just in CLI form. So it gives you you can just get an empty 200 with just Caddy respond, just as a kind of a sanity check, maybe for your HTTP client to make sure it's working. You can customize a status code. You can write a custom body. We now default to a content type of text plain, so because without a content type, it kind of messed up some clients. We also detect JSON, though. If you have a valid JSON array or object, we'll set that content type instead. Again, just for convenience. We don't, other than that, we don't sniff content types, though. Which maybe we could for this, because it's supposed to be hard-coded, but this is really cool because you can actually use it with some basic templates, and you can spin up multiple servers with one command. So here, for example, I can pipe in a simple body that's templated and have it listen on ports 2000 through 2004. So there's 5 servers running, and they're all responding I'm server, and then their server number, and then their port number. And so you can see, like, for example, if you want to test a load balancer or some sort of, I don't know, you just want to hit multiple servers and see which one you're hitting, this is a great way to do it. I actually wrote this because I needed this to test Caddy's load balancer. You can even pipe in like a maintenance page or something and give it a custom status code. So it's really useful. Francis said our builds are done. Cataloging, signing. So this is new. Mohammed's worked super hard on this to make it so that our artifacts are signed and certified as coming from us officially. So that was most of our beta releases, was testing this process. So you're going to see, instead of 28 release assets, you're going to see 134, I think, which is a lot. So there's a lot of SBOMs and signatures and, of course, archive files. Yeah, crossing fingers, this all works. Muhammad says don't jinx the CI, but I didn't jinx it. Didn't jinx it. Lots of uploading going on. Lots of PEM files, SIG files. Probably good. Okay. So anyway, Caddy Respond is really cool, really useful for simple stuff. Gotta love these commits. Oops. We are now using Go 119 with a minimum of 118. Shutdown delays. So we had this issue open for a while that was kind of bothering me, just leaving it unresolved. And what this feature does is basically the problem is that people want to know when their server is going to go down before it goes down. So they want to move it out of the rotation, or they want to basically take some sort of action before it actually becomes unresponsive, which I guess is a valid use case. I would think that like a load balancer, once it should be able to automatically detect, oh, the server's not responding, let me just put you over here instead, or do some other thing. But apparently it's useful in, I don't know, a container context or something to know when a server is going to go down before it does. So what we have is this ability to basically schedule a shutdown, or basically delay a shutdown for a certain amount of time before the grace period starts. So when you change the config or you shut down a server, the grace period kicks in, which means that it stops accepting connections and lets existing requests finish up, and then it finishes closing down. So it's kind of a graceful shutdown. Our release draft is ready. Looks like it worked. Oh, yeah, almost. So we're now publishing to Cloudsmith, which we're thankful for their support. They have donated resources to the project so that we can distribute our Debian packages. So you can do apt install Caddy after you add our RPM, or our, is it RPM? Whatever it's called. So yeah. Oh yeah, shutting down. So shutdown delay. So the grace period is useful for graceful shutdowns, but they are kind of, they're kind of sudden, I guess. So what this feature does is you can specify a shutdown delay in your config. Thanks, Francis. I know nothing about package distribution. Debs for Debian. That makes sense. So, so what this does is you can specify a shutdown delay, and so when the config is changed or you are exiting the server, it will actually wait, in this case, 10 seconds. During that time, the server will continue to operate normally. There's no grace period yet. It will continue to accept new connections, but if you have, for example, a health check endpoint or some other thing, the only difference during the shutdown delay is that two placeholders have a different value. We call them http.shuttingdown and http.timeuntilshutdown. And so you can basically have a health check endpoint that if it knows the server is going down, you can respond with some other value or status code, like 503, service unavailable, and maybe even print what time, like how long until shutdown. So your load balancer or your health checker or whatever can know, oh, I should probably stop using that server. So that's kind of useful. This does block your config reloads and exits. So I don't know another way to do it without blocking, but this seems to be the most well, I'm just thinking we did just change something even this weekend. So maybe this doesn't, no, it does block. Yeah, so this blocks for the shutdown delay. That's kind of useful. Oh yeah, so Go 118 gives us some new version information. This has been kind of one of the initial reasons that we even made Caddy in the first place, was to embed version information properly, so that when you run Caddy version, you can get the right version, because it's really important to know, like, what code am I even running? The problem is that if you run Go build on a binary, you can't get that binary's version. Like, even with Go modules, it doesn't have that. It just says devel. It has the versions of all its dependencies, which is great, but not of itself. And that's an open Go bug, which I think I've linked here. Yeah, these Go issues, like 29,000 and 50,000, something that hopefully they'll fix that someday so that you can actually get the true module version for the main module. But apparently it's tricky. So what they did instead is they now embed, when you run Go build, they do embed the version control system commit or SHA for that build. And so we now use that information if we don't know anything else. So if you're not using Xcaddy and you do just run Go build to make your Caddy binary, you should at least have a VCS version that we print if nothing else is available. So that's at least some information. So that can be really helpful in troubleshooting and stuff. We also have like a short and a long version for like user agent strings and I don't know, whatever, if that's useful. So yay, I guess some progress there. Some bug fixes. Let's see here. Oh yeah, early hints. So I think this is worth shouting out. Francis just got back from France, where he spoke about Caddy in the API Platform Conference, which is super cool. I spoke there last year. I couldn't make it this year, so I'm glad Francis was able to go. Kevin Dunglaw contributed to Go and Caddy and Go's reverse proxy. All three of those things contributed support for 103 status codes. So it's actually not very new. Early hints is a draft standard since like 16 or 18 or something, where it kind of got superseded or forgotten about because of HTTP 2 server push, which at the time was considered to be superior. However, we have found that in practice, server push is a little tricky to get right and can even be worse in a lot of cases. And so people are starting to be like, hey, what about those early hints? And people are like, oh yeah. So Chrome, I think, is not going to support server push much longer. But it's still used, like HTTP clients that support push, like they'll continue to support push. So we're not going to drop support for it. But anyway, early hints is really nice because you basically send an HTTP 1XX, like an informational response that just has headers. You just send that before sending the actual response. So you can write your header multiple times now. So if you've ever gotten that error in Go, like, multiple calls to write header or whatever, like you still can't do that unless you are writing 1XX status codes. So if you send a 103 status code with link headers, your client, the HTTP client, should know that it needs to request those resources, and it doesn't need to wait for the full response. So maybe your full response takes a little while to give because maybe it's a complex database query or some slow backend. But in any case, what you can do is, if you know that the client is going to need other resources while you're still like finishing the response, you can tell it, hey, start requesting these, and then the client can do that while you send the full like big heavy response. So used properly, this can be useful. So our proxy will send those through. So if your backend is emitting 1XX responses, then our proxy will shuttle them through. But you can also originate Oh, that's a good one. I should talk about that. Ooh, and this one. But hang on. I'm looking for a commit. You can originate. Yeah, this one. In Caddy, you can also originate these 103 responses. So for example, if you know your client will likely support 1xx responses, and you know that it's going to take a little while for the page to be generated, you can respond right away with some link headers saying, hey, you need this style sheet, you need this JavaScript, and just write that right away. So that also works now within Caddy. You can use the respond handler for that. I also should mention that Caddy has received a lot of support from Le Tool, which is the company Kevin works at. And you can see they do API platform, they sponsor Symfony, and they're very expert in a lot of these technologies. And they do a lot of consulting in France, and as a, I believe, nonprofit, or they have some tax status that's very useful there. So if you're in France and you need some software development done, highly recommend this very professional team. And we're very thankful for their support and their contributions to the project. So another little patch that's kind of interesting is that reverse proxy flushing stuff. So if you are streaming through the reverse proxy, you probably want very low latency. You don't want this extra buffering happening, which can be useful for wire efficiency. But you want to be some people want to be able to just send off a payload and not worry about what we found this. There's a broadcaster, I think, using Caddy, and they just wanted to send off their video payload, their multimedia payload, and then close the connection and move on to the next thing without any delay, without any holdup, free up the resources. And they wanted Caddy to finish proxying it on its end, even if the client closes the connection. So before, we would close the connection to the backend if the client disconnected, because it would be like, why should we continue proxying this if the client isn't even there for the response? But they made a valid case that in these streaming or very low latency scenarios, you want the proxying to finish even if the client disconnects. The client doesn't care about the response, it's a best effort kind of thing. And so we made this change where if the flush interval is -1, in other words, you explicitly say in your config, I'm in streaming mode, Caddy will continue proxying to the backend even if the client disconnects early. So that's more efficient, a little faster. Okay, we've got smarter path matching and rewriting. So this one, I hated this, but I kind of grew to be very fascinated by this issue. This is a long-standing issue that it's kind of the bane of a lot of web servers and frameworks, nothing Caddy specific really. But basically the question is, //foo/bar the same as /foo/bar? Or is /foo%2f bar the same as /foo/bar? So %2f is the URL encoding of /. They are distinct, and developers here, and I actually found this in Laravel, this issue where it was discussed pretty passionately. A lot of developers wanted Laravel to preserve the %2f because their URLs have data, like their paths have data that that includes a /. And they didn't want that to be treated as a path separator. That's a valid use case. Was not a very popular decision for Laravel to just ignore it and basically say it's working as intended, figure out some other way. But after looking into it, I heavily sympathize because it's complicated and it's hard. So I thought about this a lot, and I actually did chime in eventually and kind of give a very thorough kind of essay on what's going on here. So yeah, I understand why web servers and frameworks, what they'll do is they'll normalize the URL and then they'll perform operations or matching or routing on it. And that's very valid. But it's also valid that your %2f might actually be part of your application data. Like that slash might be part of the data, not the actual path semantics. So, for example, if you have like a route like bands and then AC/DC, which of course has a slash in it, and then maybe a song name, you don't want the slash in AC/DC to be treated as part of the routing pattern. And so what we did in Caddy is I rewrote Caddy's path matching logic. By the way, the spec does say, where does it say this? Well, somewhere in the spec it says that, oh yeah, here we go. Distinct resources should not be identified by HTTP URIs that are equivalent after normalization. So the recent RFC 9110 does actually recommend against using data in paths that is confusing to the parsers, basically. So you shouldn't probably put a band name like AC/DC as application data in your path. So I agree with that ultimately, but this was kind of fun. So I went ahead and did this where I rewrote our path matching logic so that basically we interpret encoded characters and multiple slashes in the configuration as literal conveyance of your intent. So if you write a path matcher like /foo/bar, it'll match. We still normalize, that's important for security, and so it'll match foo/bar, it'll match it with the %2f, and even if all the characters are encoded, which is unnecessary, but that'll get normalized down to the URI, to the normalized URI, and then your path matching happens. So that's the same. But if you do have a path matcher with %2f in it, then we actually will only match it if the URL has literally %2f. So we make escape sequences literal, and we also extend this to wildcards, which I think is kind of crucial. So if you want to match this bands example with AC/DC in the middle, you can't do that with this matcher because this gets normalized. But we made a new matcher pattern, a %*, where we were saying match anything in this path component, but keep any encoded characters literally encoded. So basically treat them as application data. And so now you can tell the parser which you want there. We also extended this to double slashes, so if you have double slashes in your pattern, we match those literally. And we also do something similar with rewriting. So this is really cool. I think it's kind of a cool balance of, I mean, other servers you either have to turn the multiple slashes on or off, but here you can specify exactly what you want to do, which I think is hopefully useful. So we have a question, does the new path matching mean that I don't need to do double negate regex paths anymore? Maybe. It kind of depends what your path is negating or what your regex is matching. This doesn't cover everything. There are still cases that it doesn't cover. We could extend this to regular expressions, maybe. But if someone needs that, maybe let's open an issue and talk about it. Okay, I'm going to take a pause here because our release is finished, apparently. Wait, here it is. Yeah, so our release is done. Hooray. So let's go back to releases. Cool. So the changelog has only 5 entries in it. What I'm going to do is, sometimes I like to generate GitHub's release notes. This is kind of a new thing, just for fun. It's quite a lot. So this is from 252 to 260. Cool. Look at these release assets. So we've got PEM files, which are certificates, I guess. Mohammed, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know what. So we're going to publish information about what's in all these files and how to like verify signatures and stuff, if you want to do that. So we have signature files. So we've signed this artifact. We also have a software bill of materials, I believe. SBOM. Oh, Mohammed says he's currently writing instructions on how to verify signatures. Perfect. So SBOMs give you kind of a list of what's contained here. So you can, like writing it this minute. Yeah, cool. So so these are, software bill of materials. So these are going to be useful if you care about where your sources are coming from and where your code is coming from, what's in your code that you're running. But yeah, we still have our deb files and we have our tar.gz files and our zip files if you're interested in those things. So, well, you'll need those things obviously to run Caddy. Okay, this is getting to be quite a long stream. The release itself took, probably 30 or so minutes. Let me finish up here on some of the other major features. There's so many. I don't even know which ones to highlight in the stream because I just don't have time for them all. Let's see. Oh, events. Let's talk about events. Francis kind of he headed this one up. Basically, we've had this need for, because Caddy automates a lot of things, people want the ability to hook into various parts of Caddy's code, even kind of deep in the code, like where Caddy is renewing a certificate. And so we finally have made that possible through this new event system. So this is currently implemented as an app, kind of like HTTP or TLS or PKI in Caddy. Those are all different apps in your config. They're app modules. So there's an events app module that you can configure. And so here's how it looks. You have an events app. You can define subscriptions. So for each subscription, you have a list of events that you want to subscribe to. And then you have a list of handlers to do things with those events. So in this case, this handler called exec runs a command. And you can pass in information from the event like the domain name. So if you want, when a certificate is obtained, and you want to, let's say, reload some configuration of another service, you could run like system control reload or whatever, or you could run a custom command and pass in the domain name that it got a certificate for. You can also do this in the Caddy file pretty easily with the same kind of idea. You say events in your global options, you say on, and then the event name, and then the name of the handler module, and then the actual config for that handler. So I only have implemented an exec handler, which is not included in this Caddy distribution just because we're not really sure, well, first of all, it's not super efficient to run commands on events, especially popular events or common ones, but mostly we want to see how people are going to use this and what they need before we bundle something in and realize that that was not very well implemented or whatever. So we're gonna just kind of take this one piece at a time. So what we've done is we have shipped an event emitting system. So we emit events like unhealthy and healthy from the reverse proxy when backends go up or down. Cert obtaining, cert obtained, and cert failed for certificate renewals. We have an event for if a certificate is revoked by OCSP. We have an event for a get certificate call during a handshake, or events for when managed and unmanaged certificates are loaded into the in-memory cache. So hopefully those will be a useful starting point for you. You can do things. We need to write handler modules for the events, but feel free to open issues or even just write your own handler module. We'll have documentation on that coming soon. You can look at my exec handler as an example if you want to. It's events exec, I think. Yeah. So you just run xcaddy with this module, and yeah, so it's pretty simple. You just implement a handle method, which takes a context and the event. You can get a replacer from the event, from the context, I should say, and the replacer has all the event data in it, and as does the event itself. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward to implement those. So thanks, Francis, for working on that. This is cool. So plugins can listen or register listener networks. So currently listener networks are things like TCP, UDP, Unix. I see a question in the chat I'm going to come to in just a second about metrics. What we've done is allowed you to extend this capability where if you register a network type, a custom network type, then your plugin can provide Caddy the listener. So if you want to register the foo network type and then people use that in their config, then they'll get a listener from your plugin. So this is really useful. This came at the request of Tailscale, which is doing something really cool with this. So I don't know what I mean, it's all public, like the code they've written. I just don't know if we're ready to announce that yet, but this is really cool coming up. So if you use Tailscale, it's really exciting, trust me. I'm stoked for this. So that's neat. We have a question about metrics. So just over the weekend or so, we decided to make metrics opt-in. Let me scroll down here to that commit. Where was that? Here we go. So metrics have a bit of a performance problem or an efficiency problem. For really busy servers, you'll probably notice this. I've seen a lot of stack traces that are very, very deeply nested under, with metrics handlers and such. And I think our implementation could be improved, and so we've been talking about it a lot. Dave and Francis and others. We also have kind of a new contributor who's been really involved there in our Slack. We've been talking a lot about how to make metrics improve. Lots of redundant metrics. And, I did some tests where I removed, so here's metrics. Yeah, the metrics middleware is wrapping the response for every middleware that is chained in. Anyway, so when I removed the metrics code, I was able to get a pretty significant performance bump. Probably about 12 to 15% faster. So I think there's some optimizations that we need to make there, but it was kind of becoming enough of an issue. It was coming up enough times that, we decided it's a good idea to make it opt-in. So we made it very easy to opt-in with the metrics option for your server's global option. And yeah, I see there's some discussion in the chat about this. A lot of people really want metrics per host. That's really hard because I guess the metrics format does not do well with unbounded cardinality. High cardinality metrics are a bit of a problem, which is unfortunate because we have very dynamic servers in Caddy. Like, we have very demanding use cases. Man. And so, we're hoping that the metrics libraries and formats and protocols can keep up with our demands, but we also have very frequent config changes and stuff, and so it's just, there's a lot of issues. We do have an open discussion going though for that, so feel free to, I think I tweeted it somewhere, but feel free to find the issue about it and chime in there. I'd love to get your thoughts on actual ways that we can improve it and get your ideas there. So yeah, you can comment on this issue, for example, if you have ideas on how to improve our Prometheus metrics. So for now, they are opt-in as of 2.6, so make sure to turn that on if you rely on metrics in Caddy. Did you notice that we're below 60 issues and 10 pull requests? That's we got a lot done. It's never been above 100. We had a lot of open pull requests, but I finally closed them. So yeah, we have, there's so many other changes and improvements. The fast CGI middleware was completely rewritten, or the transport, I should say, was completely rewritten, or at least refactored pretty significantly. Let's see, where was that? Here we go. So fast CGI was kind of the original, it was in the original Caddy release 7 years ago, and I've never touched the code since then. I didn't even write it originally, and I have all the credits and license information in the code and such, but fast CGI is used by PHP applications pretty heavily, and so this code was able to get a pretty good performance improvement. Let's see here. Yeah, I was able to show about 10% less memory and huge improvement in garbage collection. And we're able to actually match or even exceed Nginx's performance. And we're not doing connection pooling yet either. So thanks to Whitey Dang for contributing this. So fast CGI is much faster. Our file server is also much faster. This new contributor, I don't know how to say his username. It's FLGA, I think. Yeah, so we now use send file. It was kind of a silly oversight, but Caddy wasn't using send file all this time. And so before the patch, I was getting 96,000 requests per second serving the Caddy homepage. With the patch, I was getting 146,000 requests per second. So that was about a roughly a 50% increase in speed. Now, granted, that does only work over HTTP because we're not doing KTLS, which is really dicey. We might come back to that. But it is nice that we're using send file. And actually, we're also using, even with TLS, you'll see performance improvements from 76,000 requests per second to 95,000, for example. Or, 2.7 gigabytes per second to 3.4 gigabytes per second. Because, and this has been verified through multiple benchmarks and tests, different systems, profiling, and it's because of less buffer copying. We implement a more efficient kind of a read from, write to way of doing it. So if you're familiar with Go interfaces, we've implemented those interfaces. So your file server will be much more efficient. We still have a lot of work to do on the reverse proxy and making that more efficient. But like the HTTP reverse proxy, But in some recent tests, let's see, Caddy yeah, this guy, Tyler. I don't know if you saw this, but he recently wrote 7,000 words comparing Nginx and Caddy's performance. And we're actually pretty pleased to see that Caddy was pretty much equivalent to Nginx's performance. Sure, you can tune both Caddy and Nginx very, very tightly to make it perform, to make Nginx perform better, make Caddy perform better, but that won't, it would be such specific tuning, it wouldn't be useful information. And so I think this is really good that the Caddy has actually been able to perform very robustly and competitively with Nginx. So it was pretty well done, I think. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna probably wrap up this stream and give my voice a break. But I encourage you to look through the release notes here. I'm gonna publish these in just a few minutes. These are all the commits. You can scroll through them if you want. But most importantly, try it out and get excited, because 2.6 is gonna let you do some really cool things. And so you've got a question. Do you think there are any use cases where you would rather prefer a different web server or reverse proxy over Caddy? I mean, if it were me, I would probably just extend Caddy to make it do what I need it to do. I personally don't have a need for anything else. Caddy does more than I need currently. Recently I needed to test my load balancing, right? And so I implemented this Caddy respond command, which you're getting here in 2.6, because I needed something to spin up 5 servers that were identical just on my local machine, but they all responded with a different number or something, so I could tell them apart. So I just did that. I figure that's actually pretty useful and pretty basic functionality for a server to have. So I think we got a request the other day, or I did via email or something, for serving multiple concurrent media streams to many clients, but if they're getting the same stream, then there should only be one connection to the back end. I don't think Caddy's proxy does that yet, but could probably make it do that. So I don't know, there are things Caddy doesn't do alone currently, but plugins can make it do virtually anything. I don't know, so it's hard to say whether Caddy is unsuitable for certain use cases. We got news this last week that Cloudflare just wrote their own proxy in Rust because Nginx was too slow for them. So it was it a question of whether they could have changed Nginx to make it do what they need? Well, I know they already were running their own Nginx fork, basically. They probably would have had to change the complete architecture of Nginx. Because clearly garbage collection is not their problem, right? The problem was its architecture is configured. They were fighting the config, it sounds like, and how it handled a lot of kernel stuff. So, you could probably get that kind of thing out of a language like Go if you can tolerate the garbage collection. I think Rust is also a great solution to that if you absolutely cannot tolerate garbage collection. And so I don't know. I think for most people Caddy should be fine, and if it doesn't do what you need right now, then let's implement it. If nothing else, as a plugin that you can use. But yeah, I think everyone should be using Caddy, and maybe not Cloudflare, if even Go is too slow for them, but I think that's also kind of a very like niche case. I think, I mean, we see that Caddy is as fast as, or even sometimes faster than Nginx. I think that Cloudflare could probably get the performance that they need from a server like Caddy if they could tolerate the garbage collection. My guess is that they probably could, and they just wanted to squeeze out every ounce of performance, given that their role in infrastructure is to have more bandwidth than the other guy, so, and have more compute. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense. But unless you're Cloudflare, like, I don't see why Caddy wouldn't be a suitable fit. So yeah, good question. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and finish the release and get it out the door. So thanks for joining, and I hope this was interesting, and let me know if you have any questions or comments or would like to sponsor.